Okay, you guys, I am so excited. Today, I have a wonderful person named Beth, and she has got some of the most beautiful children, and she's so wonderful and said yes to speaking to us because she's had a wonderful experience. And I'm so excited to hear more of her story. I know a little bit of her story, but I'm excited to know more and have her share her experience and everything that she's been through because it's just so much fun to learn everybody's different stories because seriously, everybody has something different people. So I will go ahead and turn the time over to her. I'm so excited for you guys to listen to her and to learn, and I'll turn over to you.
Thank you. She said, my name's Beth, and I am a mom. I have 8 children, and we had 6 biological children, and then we adopted 2 children from China. So we adopted internationally. And it's a funny thing because when my husband and I first got married, I kind of thought maybe I wouldn't be able to have kids. I'd never been told that or anything, but I was drawn so deeply to adoption that I told him, I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen here. When we started, decided to start our family, I thought maybe we wouldn't be able to have kids. And he said, you know what, I've always felt like I would adopt too. So maybe that would be our story. And so when we decided we wanted to start to have a family, we kind of started having maybe even a little bit earlier than we thought we might, because we thought it might take some time. And then like 2 weeks later, I was pregnant. So I thought, well, I was really surprised, but it was just not difficult for us to get pregnant. And I know that for a lot of women it is. And I thought maybe that would be my story, but it wasn't. And so we had 6 children and they just came one after the other. And I did have really difficult pregnancies and I would get blood clots. So they kind of each were increasingly hard, with lots of blood thinners and all that kind of thing. And so they were kind of scary, but I mean, we definitely could have had more children, but kind of after 6, we're like, this is it. This is our time to adopt now. And so I'm a baby person. I love babies. Like if you have a baby, I'm gonna come steal your baby and hold your baby. So at first it was really hard for me because I felt drawn to international adoption, and you do not adopt babies when you adopt internationally. You definitely adopt children. But I still felt like that's where it was. And so we started looking into international adoption, and we first thought, well, we'll adopt from Haiti. And we kind of worked in that direction for a little while, and then it just didn't like click into place. And it's hard to explain how that feels, but it just wasn't quite right. And so when we turned our direction to look into China, it was like everything just opened up one after the other. And everything just was right there. And it was just, we knew that this was where we were supposed to adopt. And when we first started looking into it, if you adopt internationally, you have to use special agencies. There's a lot of them, you just mostly do it by mail. So you don't necessarily need to pick one geographically close to you, but we did pick one that's in Ogden. And they, I called them up and inquired about it. And there's only certain countries that will let you adopt children if you already have a pile of children. So China was one that said, yes, you can still adopt even if you have quite a few children. Now, sadly, this policy has changed, and it changed the year after we brought home our son. And now they will only let you have 5 children in the home. So if you have a big family, you'll probably have to look at a different country. But there are some still. But at the time, we called up that agency and they sent us over some files, and there was just this picture of our daughter, just this cute little peanut, and we saw her and it just felt like that was it. I'm like, okay, I mean, country aside, I think this is our daughter, and my husband agreed. And so we called our agency and we're like, hey, we really think that this little girl is our daughter. And they said, well, that's just not possible because no matter how you file your paperwork, you won't be done in time to be able to get this child, because we only have her file for a 6-month period, and it just takes a really long time. If you choose international adoption and you choose certain countries are Hague or non-Hague, it depends on your filing for citizenship and all these kinds of things before the adoption is complete. So it's not like domestic where there's still kind of a lot to do after that child's in your home. You do everything in advance. So it is a little lengthier. And our cute, sweet agent was just like, there's just no way. And so I didn't know anything about it. I'm like, well, I mean, I guess there's no way. So I shouldn't worry too much. And I thought maybe she was just like the little picture of this girl who would bring us to our daughter. And so that's how I kind of thought about her picture. And we went to bed that night, and I'm just like, well, I guess we'll move forward. I still think this is right. And I'm just really sad it's not going to be this little girl. And I woke up the next morning and I'm just like, that's it. It's her. I mean, I don't know how all the math will work, but it's her. And so we got started and we were able to make a lot of progress really rapidly, which if you know me in paperwork, it was a miracle. I'm not great with paperwork. I have little piles all over my house I need to clean up. So it was a miracle. And I called up our agent. She's just like, there's just still no way that this will happen because it just is such a lengthy process. And so I talked with her on the phone, and before I even realized what I was saying to her, I just told her, I just said, you know, I don't know how all this will work out, but I want you to know that there will be miracles that will come about, that will bring this child into our home. And she said, are you saying that there will be miracles that will change the way adoption works? I said, I'm saying there will be. And after I hung up the phone, I was terrified because I thought, oh my goodness, what have I just promised this poor woman? Because essentially, if she holds the file for me, she can't adopt it to anyone else. And that file moves on. And anyway, so it was an investment for our agency as well as for us, but she was so good and she kept that file. And even though I didn't know what it meant, when I felt like I should say those words, it all really did work out, and it came out, and she was our daughter. So we went to go pick her up, and my husband, since we have piles of children at home, he stayed home with the kids, and I went over with my mother-in-law to pick up our little girl. And it's hard to describe what it's like to meet someone that's only ever been a picture or a piece of paper. And it was just a really special moment, and you don't know them, and they're dirty, and you just don't know them. You don't know what to expect, but that peace in your heart, I mean, it just all comes together in that moment when you actually hold them. And I knew then that it didn't matter that she wasn't a little baby, and it wouldn't matter basically anything. I mean, I just knew that those steps that we would take would be for us together, and I would still be there for her first step, and I would still be there for her first taste of ice cream, and I would still be there for her first day of school. And I think it healed up all of those worries that I think that I had. And, you know, a lot of people, probably the most common question I get about adoption, especially international adoption, is just, weren't you scared? I mean, sometimes you hear some really scary stories, or adoption can be difficult, and there's a lot of trauma involved. So that's always a top like 3 questions is, were you scared? And I couldn't explain how I wasn't scared. I didn't feel afraid. I just felt like it would be okay. And I think part of that is I had 6 kids already, which was just enough exposure to understand that kids come with challenges. And for whatever reason, we're all here to kind of work through some issues, and it's challenging. And my second child especially has always been really hard. And he struggled kind of with some mental health even as a little boy, and he struggles now. And I think as hard as he was, it helped me see that even a really messy, kind of complicated, maybe what the world would say unideal situation is beautiful and meaningful. And it didn't feel accidental, and I didn't feel compelled to try to fix everything. And so I really credit my really hard child with maybe opening my heart to truly being open to adoption, because there are things maybe now that I look at it that people would be scared about, but I don't know, it's really, really awesome. And when I went to go pick up Lily, one of the things, I had been in third world countries before, but this was my first time to China. And one of the things that really sticks out is just the immense poverty. I think partly because politically, China isn't our ally. We're not really close. We're not really friends. I think it's always kind of being sold in the news that these are our enemies. They're going to come invade us and, take over the United States. And so when you get to China and you see that most people don't have a bathroom or a kitchen, and I was able to see people who had physical disabilities dragging themselves through the street begging. It just changes your worldview. I mean, it's just like, there's politics aside. These people aren't going to come invade me tomorrow. I mean, it was so devastating. And so when we came home, you know, I think that opened my heart to a second adoption already, just picking her up. And I also hoped to be able to do a second adoption just so our daughter wouldn't be like ethnically isolated within the home, and just so she could have someone else who shared a similar story, which they are the best of little buddies. I feel like they're twins, even though they're 8 months apart, but they are best buddies. So after Lily was home, and it just was awesome. She's amazing. And not only is she just so fun, but my kids are usually really introverted and super quiet. A lot of them have anxiety. They're not very social. I'm kind of the one that's like, go play with a friend. Maybe you could go to someone else's house and leave home for a few hours. But Lily is just the opposite in every way. Everywhere she walks, she dances, she's just boisterous, she makes friends everywhere she goes. And it's been super fun to just see how kind of prepackaged people are, and just to enjoy her for her uniqueness. It's super fun. So she has just been amazing. And so it was probably about 4 months after she was home that we started again, because we knew it was kind of a long process. So we're like, we'll go back again. And I think the misconception I maybe had is that China has just piles of girls for people to adopt. And it's because girls are, that's just what you kind of hear in the news, but it's actually totally not true. And I think part of the reason for that is because medical issues are huge there. It's just, there's no medical insurance, care is very expensive. And so people go over to get a healthy little girl. And so there's just lots and lots of boys. So we decided the second time, even though we already had 5 boys, we're like, we're going to go back for a boy. And so we got the file of a little boy. And when we first looked at his file, he did have physical disabilities. He couldn't walk. He's missing the bones, the fibula in his leg. There's 2 bones in your lower leg. Turns out they're both pretty important. So he only had 1. He has a tibia in each leg, but the fibula was gone, which meant the tibia grew really crooked, and the foot was also not intact. So you get a file when you internationally adopt, but they can really vary, like how informative they really are. So it just kind of mentioned he was missing a couple of toes, but it did have pictures. And so when we looked at his pictures, we're like, well, that looks pretty serious. I don't think even the best medical care could correct this issue. And so when we went over to adopt our son, and he actually has a hand difference too. He only has 1 hand. His right hand has just like 2 tiny fingers. But don't worry, he still plays football like a boss. So he's good. But we decided that we would try to do this. I had a couple of my kids had been seen at Shriners Hospital. So I'd been up there and was a little bit familiar with how they work, but I was familiar enough to know that he would be able to get really good care there, and also that it wouldn't be financially devastating, because they are like a no-cost hospital and they just bring in the best. I mean, this situation where Gene didn't even have a diagnosis on his file went from being a total mystery to walking in the door and just being like, oh yeah, we see this every day. So we decided to go for it, and we were a little nervous that maybe he would have other extensive issues that like we couldn't see in a picture. We had to kind of decide if we would be okay if he was really wheelchair bound, if that would work out. And we did. We decided, we're like, yeah, we're okay with that. We feel like we can do it. So we went back, and it was almost exactly a year later, after Lily was home, that we brought Gene home. And he is opposite of Lily. He's super quiet. He's really thoughtful and really careful. And he's also like so quietly competitive, which is different from my other kids too. My other kids, I take him to soccer and they're like, no, seriously, you take it. I'm not gonna fight you for the ball. You look like you really want it. You just take it. And Gene, even though he's so quiet, like there's just this fire in him, and he's always had it. And so when we brought him home, the doctors were just like, we usually would amputate both feet and correct the crooked bone. And they have to kind of chop up the bone to make it straight enough for a prosthetic. So hard. They're like, we would do this at 9 months old if he were born in the United States, because then when they learn to walk, that's just how they learn to walk. And it's just kind of done and taken care of. And there's less phantom pain. I mean, there's just less issues the younger you do it. So we decided to just do it right away and not wait, which was a dilemma, because a lot of times people are like, should I wait until they understand English? I mean, can you even imagine? He was 3.5 and he came home and he didn't speak English. New family, new country, new everything, new food. He did speak a little bit of Mandarin, and my kids actually know Mandarin from school. And so they would speak to him a little bit, but most of what he spoke wasn't even like a true Mandarin. It was a dialect. So he was just the sweetest, quietest kid. And we did his surgeries. It was about 6 weeks after he'd been home that he had his surgery, and they did a double amputation, and he just had no idea what was coming, and we couldn't explain it. But truthfully, I felt like that time was so important and such a bonding time for us. And it was almost like the baby time, except for he was bigger and heavier, but he couldn't walk. So, he would crawl, and he couldn't talk because he didn't speak English, and he relied on us for every care. And it was really such an amazing time. And it was such a great time to watch my kids be nurturing, my older children, because he needed lots of piggybacks. And they'd even help him get to the bathroom. It was really a special time. And I will be forever grateful for him that we shared that time with him. But now he's 7 years old, and he plays soccer and golf and basketball and football. And he wants to play every sport, which is funny because I'm sitting sideline with my 7th child, 6th boy, and everyone's just like, oh, you must have sat soccer tons. I'm like, no, my kids do not want to play soccer. Gene wants to play everything. Last season, his leg was kind of a goofy fit. And so seriously, like 3 times a game, that leg would go flying. Soccer ball, or someone would like step on his toe during football and his leg would pull out, and he just would like toss that thing back on and get back after it. And he is the sweetest. And I just think it was awesome. And part of me just wishes everybody could experience something like that. And I know that it's not possible, but the things that you can learn by raising someone who doesn't look like you and doesn't act like you and isn't like genetically a part of you, I think it was so incredibly eye-opening for me just to see how much God loves his children in every circumstance. And I remember we're a family of faith, and one really big part of our faith is going to the temple to be sealed. And in our faith, families are the big deal. And I remember before we brought Lily to the temple, because the temple sealing is like, this is it, your family for forever. And as we got ready to go, I thought about being in China when I was picking up Lily. And when I was there with her, you go to the consulate. I actually got to be sworn in as a citizen in her behalf. She was just 1.5, but I was sworn in. So you go on this line, and they literally see 5,000 Chinese people a day who want a visa to come and visit the United States. So there's this huge throng of people in this massive line. And then there's like this itsy bitsy line. If you're a US citizen, there's like one other person in it. And so you kind of swim through all these people. And one thing about China that broke my heart, like really into a million pieces, was they do not allow dual citizenship. And I didn't realize this. I just hadn't processed it fully. And I'm standing in this line and I'm just like, wait, like she won't be a Chinese citizen? And I was just overwhelmed with, I'm just like, that just doesn't seem right. I mean, she was born here. And I was so upset. And at the same time, I'm seeing these 5,000 people trying to get in the door. I mean, they would see 5,000 a day. And I just thought, I know these people in a minute would wish they were her and wish they could have what it takes to get out. But it was still like, I just was devastated because I thought, I cannot believe they're like, yeah, we erase her like identification number, we erase it. And I was just like, what are you even talking about? How can you erase a person's history? And it was just really upsetting to me. And then as we went to the temple, like a second wave of that came back for me. And I felt like, wait a second, I just feel like I don't want to steal her story. I don't want to change like where she's from. And I just had this big dilemma because I guess in my heart, I felt like there's enough brokenness to go around in the world that maybe her parents didn't have a good shot. I mean, maybe they just didn't have that chance to raise her, and in a world that was healed and better and more perfect, that, I mean, she could have been the light of their life the way she is of mine. And I really felt this dilemma that maybe it was like stealing their birthright away. And I remember before we went to the temple that I just had a really deep feeling of calm, that like the temple only opens doors, it never closes them. And it put me at ease because, I mean, the world just has problems. I mean, there's 1 million babies in China in orphanages, and it just was a lot. It's a lot to take in. But I was grateful for that experience because I didn't have this dilemma of feeling like I was stealing her story for forever from parents who maybe just didn't really have a fair shot. And so it was such a special day that day. And I remember a different experience with Jean when we brought him to the temple. Now, Jean did speak enough Chinese that we had an interpreter at the temple, and it was a beautiful time. But I remember having just the strongest feeling for him that this was part of God's plan, that God had promised his family that he would come to our family and that he would be raised here and he would get the care that he needed. And it was so humbling because if God would make that kind of promise to his family, he must really love his family. I mean, God loves his family, and I think that my child has a place there too. And so it was kind of my first exposure to how adoption feels, how it's not like one or the other. You kind of have this opportunity of having like a foot in all worlds, and maybe this perspective that life can be short, but like there's this whole plan that's big and long. So it was such a good experience, and it really made me feel like I don't know who their parents are. There aren't records that way. I really hope one day they can use DNA. That's kind of something we didn't even consider when we brought Lily home because it's so new. But I really hope that one day they could maybe connect, like in this life, with people that are their family in that way. And I don't know if that will be their story or not, but I hope so. But it also just made me realize that it's all a long game. It's just a long game. And I guess if I were to tell anyone to adopt, I would just say, if you feel like called to adoption, I don't think that's something that's given to everybody. And if you really feel that way, then I would say act on it. I never felt compelled. I never, even with all of that thought of adoption when I was younger, I never felt like I had to do it, or, you know, God would be disappointed if I didn't. It was never, ever anything like this. It was more just like, hey, if you want to come on a really cool journey with me, and I'll take you. And I love it. And I love having lots of kids, and I love going to bed tired. I love doing piles of laundry, and I love most of all just being like 100% out of my league, not able to do it all, because it helps me like rely on God every day. Like, okay, the list is 2,000 things long. Like, tell me the 4 we should maybe get done today. And I feel like really guided and really led constantly, and it's very, very cool. So I don't know. I think that's most of it. Do you have any extra questions?
I love it. And I'm trying to remember the part because you did the detail about how, I don't remember how you were just saying how, just that you didn't feel any different. It's like, so one of my questions too, I should ask is, do your kids, your biological children, how do they feel about them? Feel any difference, like anything like that with them? You know, I mean, being a different race or anything, or is it just?
That's a good question. Because that's one of the top 3 that I get too. I would say they don't feel any different. There's never any kind of comment or snide comment, even in anger. They never say anything different. I would say like when they first came home, they loved them like extra. Like people would gush over them wherever, because I think people want to help big problems in the world. And so they kind of get spoiled everywhere. And I would say my kids were like the top of that list. Like, I want to teach him to walk. I want to carry him around. I want to give him a piggyback. I want to help him get his legs on. I want to do this. So yeah, my kids kind of top the list for the spoilers. And they love it. Yeah.
I love it. And seriously, like, you have one of the biggest hearts, like, just hearing you talk about it, and just like everything that you had to see, like, I can't even imagine, because I know it's different everywhere. And, you know, I would like to ask my mom too, because I'm an international adoption.
Right.
I'd like to get into it a little bit more with her and interview her and see kind of, because I know she was like you, she went by herself. My dad stayed home with the other 4, because they have 4 of their own. And so to me, 100% God is in that, to send these women by themselves to go grab these babies and see all these horrific things that she's like. And it just to know that they're like, there are so many kids out there that need a home. And so like these few like me that are just so lucky and so blessed, and to have people that just love them fiercely and get these siblings. And it's just, this is why I love doing this, because it just warms my heart that there's so many good people out there. And I know there's lots of people that want to do it. And I know money is kind of a crunch for people too. Would you have any tips on maybe the money factor with people? Because I know it can get expensive.
It is expensive, and I hate that it's expensive. I wish it weren't. And I think international is hard because like you're paying 2 countries. Essentially, the US fees are steep and the international fees are steep. And it's hard. I remember when we picked up Lily, you make all kinds of payments to different people all over the place, translating stuff, filing stuff, this, that, citizenship. And then you go to the orphanage with like a final payment, and it's in cash. And I remember like my guide helped me carry it because, you know, I didn't want to get mugged or whatever. And you bring in this pile of cash, and they put it in this money counter. And then there were 3 other people there at the orphanage and my guide, and they counted out a big pile of money and they put it aside. And then they took the other extra pile of money and split it 3 ways. And I watched them put it right into their wallet. And I just thought, money's a tricky thing. I think there's a lot to be resentful about it. And I don't know why it's a part of this process, and it is. Lily was super expensive, and it was kind of like our first time thinking of spending that much money on anything, and we just felt like it was the thing to do. I'm just like, I just think that's what we got to do. I mean, so we did it, and we took out like a loan on our house, like an equity loan, which I think is really pretty common. And we hadn't quite paid that off, but we were close with Jean. And I remember thinking, how will we do a second one? Because that's just now twice as expensive. And I remember taking kind of that first leap, and we made like our first big payment. And then Flint like had a big job come through. And I just think it's just like a lot of things in life, like you have to sacrifice, and it's just part of it. And I don't know, I really still wish it wasn't part of it, because I feel like there'd be a lot of opportunities for people. And even when China changed their rule to not let big families adopt, I'm like, are you kidding me? Because sometimes international adoption, I mean, you'll run into people who've adopted a lot of children, and I just thought, just no, it's just still better. Please let them come home. Because I can't imagine our family not being complete, and that we wouldn't be able to even do it today. But the money stinks. I don't know how else to say it. Some people GoFundMe, some people fundraise, and they do it pretty successfully. We didn't do that. I was like too self-conscious. This is where my quiet kids get it. But I'm just like, no, I don't want to have to feel worried if we buy something, you know what I mean? It was just stressful to me. So I'm like, no, we're just going to figure out how to make it work. And luckily we were able to. And I feel like maybe that's why Flint had that business come through. Just like, I think that was what it was supposed to be for. I don't know how many people feel that way when they adopt, but
no, it's crazy, because my sister's the same way. My brother-in-law, like out of nowhere, just got like all these different side jobs when they were in the process of adopting. Like, she's just like, it's crazy how it happens. Like, there was extra money to be added, and just everything flowed for when they were adopting their son. So
it's a weird thing. I think it will work out. I guess that's something to be my message to anybody. If you really feel called to do it, the money is a factor, but it's not like it's not overcomable. You can totally do it.
Right. So what would you say then is like the biggest blessing that has come from your whole experience with adoption? Besides your kids, because that's an obvious one.
Right? I mean, the kids are just the best. But I think it's just so important to see that, like, God sees everybody. And I do think that my kids have scars they'll wear their whole life. And that's very hard to think about, like not being able to fix that. But it helped me see that maybe that's not my job to fix what God needs to fix. And so I think that's been the deepest, most important lesson for me. Because I think as a mom, and especially as a young mom, I mean, I was just so responsible for my kids. I mean, their pain was my pain, their failure was my failure, and their success was my success. I think I owned it so deeply. And now as an older mom and as an adoptive mom, I see, you know what? That's your challenge, and God has us here together, and together we can do what we can with it. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, and there will be a day of healing, but it's not today. Today's the day just to love each other and walk on. And it's been a really important lesson. I mean, if not for my adoptive children, for me, and for my biological children who struggle, I don't feel as deep an ownership for it anymore, for the brokenness of the whole wide world. Maybe because when I was in China, if I would have felt ownership for the brokenness of the whole wide world, I would have been crushed, because it was just a lot of broken. But I just felt like it's okay. There's a purpose in it. There's a purpose for the heartbreak, and there's a purpose for the challenge, and it isn't to fix it. It's just to walk through it together. So I think I don't know if I would have learned that as easily without adoption.
I absolutely love it. And just learning your story, like, it's just, I seriously, every single person that I've done this with, I just have so much love in my heart for them, because no matter like how you're affected with adoption, I feel like there's a bond with everybody. Like, just because
Right.
I know how it is. I mean, there's a couple birth moms I'm so excited I'm gonna interview too. So like, just to get the perspective from everybody, it's just so good, because it's just, I don't know, I feel like more of the world needs this, because it doesn't matter what you look like, who you are. And that's the whole common theme with everybody. It's just like, your kid is your kid and your family is your family.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It does not matter one bit. And it's just beautiful. And it's amazing. And you guys are amazing. And your kids are so stinking cute. I love seeing the pictures of your little boy. He's just like you said, he's a boss, man. Like, the pictures and stuff that you posted in, he's amazing. And I just love it.
He really does.
He doesn't even care. He embraces it. It's who he is. And I love it. It's just the best thing ever.
Everyone should adopt. It's just a front row to awesomeness. Just sit back and watch your kids be awesome, and it's the best.
Well, seriously, thank you for taking some time out and doing this today. I really appreciate it. And I know people are going to get something out of this, and it's just amazing. So seriously.
So tell them they can call me if they want to do international adoption.
No, for sure.
I'll talk them into it.